When African-American detective Tessa Park wakes up married to Seoul's most feared mafia boss after a drunken night, she must choose between completing her undercover mission to destroy him or protecting the dangerously captivating man who's stolen her heart before her department tears them both apart. If you're hooked already, smash that subscribe button and hit the like icon. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. Now, let's dive into Tessa's story. Tessa's eyes fluttered open to unfamiliar softness. The sheets beneath her weren't the worn cotton of her studio apartment, but silk that whispered against her skin like water. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, painting everything in gold, and for a disorienting moment, she thought she was dreaming. Then she felt the weight on her finger. A wedding ring. White gold. Elegant. Expensive. Real. Her heart stopped. She turned her head slowly, barely breathing, and found him. Kang Dae-hyun lay beside her, dark hair falling across his forehead, his face peaceful in sleep. The man whose photograph sat in a locked drawer at the police station with warnings stamped across it in red ink. The ghost who controlled half of Seoul's underground, the untouchable king of the city's most feared syndicate. Her husband. No, Tessa whispered, sitting up too fast. The room spun. Marble floors stretched toward walls decorated with abstract art that probably cost more than she'd earn in 5 years. Through the windows, Seoul sprawled beneath them, glittering and distant. She was in a penthouse, high above the world she knew. Memories crashed through her mind in fragments. The exclusive club her informant had mentioned. Too much champagne. Dae-hyun's dark eyes across the bar, challenging her, daring her. Someone laughing about a wedding chapel nearby. Her own voice, reckless with alcohol, saying something stupid like, "I bet you wouldn't." His low reply, "I never lose bets." Oh God, she breathed, pressing her palms against her face. This couldn't be real. This had to be some elaborate prank, a drunken mistake that would dissolve with the morning light. She'd apologize, they'd laugh it off, she'd leave and pretend this never happened, and absolutely not report it to her captain because how would she even begin to explain? "Good morning, Mrs. Kang." Tessa's head snapped toward him. Dae-hyun was awake now, propped on one elbow, watching her with those impossibly dark eyes. His voice was low and steady, laced with something that sounded almost like amusement. He looked completely unbothered by the situation, as if waking up married to a stranger was just another Tuesday. "This isn't funny," she said, hating how her voice shook. "This isn't real. We were drunk. It doesn't count." "The marriage license in the study suggests otherwise." He sat up, and Tessa tried very hard not to notice the way the sheets fell away from his bare chest. "Signed by both of us. Witnessed. Legal. Then we'll get it annulled. Today. Right now." Dae-hyun smiled, slow and dangerous. "Will we?" "Yes, obviously. We don't even know each other." "I know you drink whiskey neat. You have a terrible poker face, and you laugh when you're nervous." He tilted his head. "You're doing it now." She wasn't laughing. She was having a panic attack. Tessa threw back the covers and stood, realizing too late that she was wearing one of his shirts and nothing else. Her clothes from last night were folded neatly on a chair, her shoes placed beside them, her phone on the nightstand, fully charged. "You can shower if you'd like," Dae-hyun said calmly. "There are clothes in the closet that should fit. Take your time. We'll talk after breakfast." "I'm not having breakfast with you. I'm leaving." "Are you?" He didn't move, didn't threaten, but something in his tone made her pause. "Where will you go, Tessa?" The sound of her name in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. Home. My apartment. My life. The apartment in Mapogu? The one you rent under the name Park Tessa, though that's not your real name? He smiled at her shocked expression. I told you, I don't lose bets, and I don't make decisions I haven't thought through. Tessa's blood ran cold. He knew. Somehow, this man she'd married in a drunken haze knew exactly who she was. Or at least, he knew she was lying about something. Before she could respond, Dae-hyun stood and moved toward the windows, giving her space. You're free to leave whenever you want, but I'd recommend staying for breakfast. The chef makes excellent yukgaejang, and we should probably discuss the terms of our arrangement. Arrangement? We don't have an arrangement. He turned, and the morning light caught his profile like a painting. We're married, Tessa. That's the ultimate arrangement. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. But I'm not a monster. You can go anywhere you please. Live your life. I won't keep you prisoner. How generous, she said, acid in her voice. I think so. He walked past her toward the door, and she caught the scent of his cologne, something dark and expensive. Though, I should mention, you'll have security, for your protection. I don't need protection. Dae-hyun paused in the doorway, glancing back at her. Something flickered in his eyes, gone too fast to read. Everyone who belongs to me needs protection, Mrs. Kang. The world I live in doesn't forgive vulnerabilities. He smiled slightly. Breakfast is at 8. Wear whatever makes you comfortable. Then he was gone, leaving Tessa standing in a stranger's bedroom, wearing a stranger's ring, her entire life suddenly tilted on an axis she didn't understand. She should run. Every instinct she'd honed in 3 years of undercover work screamed at her to get out, report in, let her captain sort out this disaster. But Detective Park Tessa, who'd spent 6 months carefully building a cover identity to observe Kang Dae-hyun from a safe distance, had just woken up in the center of his world. And despite the fear, despite the shock, a tiny voice in the back of her mind whispered that this might be the opportunity of a lifetime. She showered quickly, trying not to notice that everything in the bathroom was tailored to luxury she'd only seen in magazines. The closet held women's clothes in her size, which should have been creepy, but instead felt oddly thoughtful. She chose simple black pants and a white blouse, refusing to let herself wonder why he had all this ready. The apartment was massive. She followed the sound of quiet conversation down a hallway lined with more expensive art, through a living room that could fit her entire apartment twice over, to a dining room where Dae-hyun sat reading a newspaper. Coffee steamed in a cup beside him. A second place was set across from him, and the promised yukgaejang waited, aromatic and perfect. You came, he said without looking up. I was hungry. Tessa sat, maintaining distance, maintaining control. And I want answers. Fair. Dae-hyun folded the newspaper and gave her his full attention. What do you want to know? Why aren't you panicking? Normal people wake up married to strangers and panic. I don't panic. He sipped his coffee. And you're not a stranger. We spent 4 hours talking last night before the wedding. You told me about your childhood in Busan, your love for old movies, your fear of heights. I told you about my sister, my business, the restaurant where I had my first real meal after my parents died. Tessa's heart clenched. She didn't remember most of that, but she remembered his voice, low and sincere in the dim light of the bar. She remembered feeling like he actually saw her, not the carefully constructed cover identity, but the real person underneath. That was dangerous. We were drunk, she insisted. You were tipsy. I was sober. At her sharp look, he shrugged. I rarely drink. Too many enemies. But I liked listening to you talk. He leaned forward slightly. Here's the truth, Tessa. I knew what I was doing when I suggested that chapel. You laughed and said yes because something in you wanted to see what would happen. So here we are. This is insane. Probably. He smiled. But I've done worse things for worse reasons. At least this time, I'm married to someone interesting. I'm not interesting. She caught herself just in time. I'm nobody. You're a terrible liar. Dae-hyun's eyes gleamed with amusement. But that's all right. We all have secrets. He stood, setting down his napkin with careful precision. Eat your breakfast. Rest. Explore the apartment if you'd like. I have business this morning, but I'll be back this afternoon. We can discuss divorce then, if that's what you really want. He moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Tessa, the security team outside isn't negotiable. You can go anywhere in Seoul, meet anyone, live your normal life, but they follow. Always. It's not about controlling you. It's about keeping you alive. Why would anyone want to kill me? Nobody even knows I'm here. Dae-hyun's expression went cold, and for the first time, she saw the man from the police files. They will. By noon, every rival in this city will know I got married. They'll assume you matter to me, which means you're a target. His voice softened. I won't apologize for protecting you, even if you hate me for it. Before she could respond, he was gone, and she was alone with her soup and her spiraling thoughts. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe for more romantic thrillers that will keep you up at night. Hit that like button and let me know in the comments. Would you stay or run? Tessa sat in silence, processing everything. She should call her captain. She should abort the mission, request extraction, admit that she'd compromised everything by accidentally marrying her target. But as she lifted the spoon to her lips, tasting soup that was somehow exactly the way she liked it, she realized something terrifying. She didn't want to leave. The bodyguards were everywhere. Tessa noticed them the moment she stepped outside the penthouse building that afternoon, trying to pretend her life was still normal. 2 men in dark suits flanked the entrance. Another waited by a black sedan. When she walked toward the subway station, they followed at a discreet distance, silent shadows she couldn't shake. At first, it infuriated her. She was a trained detective, capable of handling herself, and being followed like some helpless socialite made her teeth grind. But as the day wore on, she noticed something strange. They weren't intrusive. When she stopped at a bookstore, they waited outside. When she sat at a cafe, they took a table by the door, ordering nothing, watching everyone who came near her with cold efficiency. And when a drunk man stumbled too close, slurring something inappropriate, one of the bodyguards was there before Tessa could even react, firmly guiding the man away with a quiet word that made him pale and practically run. "Thank you," she said, startled. The bodyguard, young with a serious face, nodded once. "Mrs. Kang's safety is our priority." Mrs. Kang. The name felt foreign on her tongue, like borrowed clothes that didn't quite fit. She wanted to correct him, to say this was all temporary, a mistake that would be fixed soon. But the words stuck in her throat. By the time she returned to the penthouse that evening, exhausted from pretending everything was fine while her mind raced through implications and complications, Dae-hyun was already home. She found him in the kitchen of all places, sleeves rolled up, cooking something that smelled incredible. You cook? The words escaped before she could stop them. He glanced over his shoulder, that subtle smile playing at his lips again. I survived on instant ramyeon until I was 16. Then I decided if I was going to live, I should eat well. He gestured to the counter. Sit. Tell me about your day. It was so domestic, so normal, that Tessa almost forgot who he was. She sat, watching his hands move with practiced confidence as he plated bulgogi and rice. Your security team is very thorough. They'd better be. I pay them enough. He set a plate in front of her, then took the seat beside her instead of across, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. Did they bother you? No. Actually, they were... She struggled for words. Professional. Respectful. Good. They know if they're not, they answer to me. He began eating, casual, as if this was their 100th dinner together instead of their first real one. And they know you're not a prisoner. You're my wife. There's a difference. Is there? Tessa picked up her chopsticks, trying to ignore how perfectly he'd cooked everything. Because from where I'm sitting, being followed everywhere feels a lot like being controlled. Dae-hyun set down his chopsticks, turning to face her fully. His expression grew serious, that playful edge disappearing. Let me tell you something about my world, Tessa. 3 years ago, I had a sister, Minseo. She was 19, brilliant, wanted to be a doctor. She had nothing to do with my business, stayed far away from everything I did. I thought that would keep her safe. Tessa's chest tightened at the past tense. One night, she went to dinner with friends. Normal night, normal restaurant in a good neighborhood. My rivals found out she was my sister. They took her to hurt me, to send a message. By the time I found her, his jaw clenched, and Tessa saw the flash of raw pain cross his face before he locked it away. She died in my arms because I wasn't careful enough, because I thought distance would protect her. The silence between them felt heavy, suffocating. Tessa wanted to say something, anything, but what comfort could she offer for that kind of loss? So yes, Dae-hyun continued, his voice quiet but firm. My men will follow you. They'll watch your back, keep you safe. Make sure what happened to Minseo never happens to anyone I care about again. If that feels like control, I'm sorry. But I won't apologize for keeping you alive. He stood abruptly, taking his barely touched plate to the sink. Tessa sat frozen, her detective's mind cataloging this new information while her heart ached for the grief she'd just witnessed. The files at the station mentioned a sister's death but listed it as collateral damage in a gang war. They never mentioned that Dae-hyun had held her as she died. I didn't know, she said quietly, about your sister. I'm sorry. Most people don't care. He kept his back to her, shoulders tense. They see the headlines. Mafia Boss's sister killed. They assume it's karma, that we all deserve what we get. They don't see that she was just a kid who wanted to save lives, not take them. Tessa stood, moving closer despite every professional instinct telling her to maintain distance. I care. He turned, surprise flickering across his features. They stood there in the kitchen, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight he carried. For just a moment, he wasn't Seoul's most feared crime lord. He was just a man who'd lost his sister and was terrified of losing anyone else. Why? He asked, genuinely curious. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Because I've spent 6 months watching you from a distance, Tessa thought. Because the files say you're a monster, but everything I've seen shows a man who protects the people in his neighborhood, who pays for kids' school supplies anonymously, who visits his sister's grave every week with fresh flowers. Because I think I've been lying to myself about what this mission really is. But she couldn't say any of that. Instead, she said simply, because everyone deserves someone who cares. Something shifted in Dae-hyun's expression, a crack in that controlled facade. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch was gentle, reverent, nothing like the dangerous man the world feared. "You're not what I expected," he murmured. "Neither are you." The moment stretched between them, fragile and electric. Then Dae-hyun stepped back, that control slamming back into place. "It's late. You should rest. The master bedroom is yours. I'll take one of the guest rooms." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." His smile was sad. "You didn't choose this, Tessa. The least I can do is give you space while you figure out what you want." He left her standing in the kitchen, confused and conflicted, her half-eaten dinner growing cold. That night, lying alone in sheets that smelled like him, Tessa stared at the ceiling and tried to remember why she was here. The mission, the investigation, justice. But all she could think about was the grief in his eyes when he spoke about Min Seo, and the gentleness in his touch when he moved her hair. The next 2 weeks fell into an unexpected rhythm. Tessa continued her normal life, meeting her police contact in careful intervals, feeding him information that was true but incomplete. Yes, Dae-hyun had business meetings. Yes, there were men who came and went from the penthouse. No, she hadn't seen evidence of the weapons, trafficking they suspected. No, she couldn't access his office. The lies came easier than they should have. At night, she and Dae-hyun had dinner together. Sometimes he cooked, sometimes she did, and they talked about everything except the obvious. He told her about growing up poor in Busan, about his first real fight, about learning that survival meant being smarter and more ruthless than everyone else. She told him about her childhood too, carefully editing the parts about police academy and her detective's badge locked in a drawer across the city. They learned each other's rhythms. He took his coffee black, woke before dawn, and played piano when he couldn't sleep. She discovered that late at night, when Seoul went quiet, she could hear soft jazz drifting from the living room. Sometimes she'd stand in the doorway, watching his hands move across the keys, and he'd sense her presence and smile without stopping. "Can't sleep?" he'd ask. "Your playing is too good to miss." He'd pat the bench beside him, and she'd sit, close enough that their shoulders touched, listening while he worked through complicated pieces that sounded like longing and loss and hope all tangled together. Those were the dangerous moments, when Tessa forgot about badges and missions, and the fact that technically she was betraying him every day she didn't report everything to her captain. 3 weeks into their accidental marriage, everything changed at a dinner party. Dae-hyun had warned her that morning. "Business associates tonight. It'll be boring and probably tense. You don't have to come." "I'm your wife, aren't I? Isn't that what wives do?" Something warm flickered in his eyes. "Careful, Tessa. You're starting to sound like you want to stay." "Maybe I do," she thought but didn't say. The dinner was held in a private room at one of Seoul's most exclusive restaurants. Tessa wore a black dress Dae-hyun had left on her bed, simple but elegant, and walked into a room full of dangerous men who all stopped talking when she entered. Dae-hyun stood immediately, his hand finding the small of her back in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. "Gentlemen, my wife, Tessa." The word wife fell into the silence like a stone in water, ripples spreading. Several men exchanged glances. One older man with silver hair and a scar across his jaw raised his glass. "Congratulations, Dae-hyun, though we were surprised to hear the news. Very sudden. The best things usually are." Dae-hyun pulled out a chair for Tessa, positioning himself between her and the rest of the table. "Shall we eat?" The meal was exactly as tense as he'd predicted. Tessa picked at her food, while men discussed shipments and territories in careful language that meant something else entirely. She felt their eyes on her, assessing, judging, trying to figure out if she was a liability or an asset. Then someone made a mistake. "So," a younger man with too much confidence and whiskey said, smirking, "how exactly did you two meet? I heard it involved quite a bit of soju and bad decisions." The table went quiet. Dae-hyun's expression didn't change, but Tessa felt him go absolutely still beside her. "Actually," Tessa said before she could stop herself, "it involved whiskey, a terrible bet, and the best decision I've made in years." The young man blinked, surprised. "Really? Because the way I heard it, she's not a mistake." Dae-hyun's voice cut through the air like a blade, quiet and absolutely lethal. "She's not a drunken accident or a momentary lapse in judgment. She's my wife, and the only real thing I've got in this entire godforsaken city. So, if anyone here has a problem with that, we can discuss it outside, now." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Drop a comment below if you think Dae-hyun should have been harsher. And don't forget to like this video. The young man went pale, mumbling an apology into his drink. The silver-haired man raised his glass again, this time with what looked like genuine respect. "To new beginnings, then." The rest of the dinner passed without incident, but Tessa couldn't stop replaying Dae-hyun's words in her mind. "The only real thing I've got." He'd said it with such conviction, such raw honesty, that her carefully constructed walls had cracked just a little more. When they finally left, stepping into the cool Seoul night, Dae-hyun was quiet. His hand found hers naturally, fingers intertwining, and Tessa didn't pull away. "I'm sorry," he said as they walked toward the car. "I shouldn't have put you in that position." "You defended me." "I embarrassed you." Tessa stopped, turning to face him under the glow of streetlights. "You made me feel like I actually mattered to you. That's not embarrassing. That's..." She struggled for the right word. "That's terrifying." Dae-hyun's expression softened, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "Why terrifying?" "Because I'm lying to you. Because every day I don't tell you the truth is another betrayal. Because I'm falling for you, and I don't know how to stop." These statements ran through her mind. "Because I don't know what we're doing," she said instead. "We're married, but we're strangers. We live together, but sleep in separate rooms. We have dinner and talk like we've known each other for years. But I don't even know your favorite color." "Blue," he said immediately. "Dark blue, like the ocean at night. And we're not strangers, Tessa. We haven't been since that first conversation at the bar when you told me you thought the stars looked lonely. All that distance between them." He stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "I know you hate mornings but love sunrise. I know you read poetry when you're sad and terrible romance novels when you're happy. I know you bite your lip when you're thinking and you hum when you cook. Tessa's heart was racing. How do you know all that? Because I pay attention. Because every moment with you is the only time I feel human instead of like the monster everyone thinks I am. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. So yes, this is terrifying, but I've done terrifying things my whole life. At least this time, I'm terrified of losing something good. She should pull away. She should go back to the penthouse, call her captain, end this before it went any further. But instead, Tessa found herself leaning into him, her forehead resting against his chest as his arms came around her. What are we doing? She whispered. I don't know. He pressed his lips to the top of her head. But I don't want to stop. They stood there on the Soul Street, two people pretending they were anything other than inevitable. That night, Tessa couldn't sleep. She lay in the massive bed, listening to the city hum below, until she heard it, the piano. Slow, melancholic notes drifting through the penthouse like a confession. She found him in the living room, still in his dress shirt but with the sleeves rolled up, his tie discarded on the couch. The city lights painted him in shades of blue and shadow as his fingers moved across the keys. Can't sleep? He asked without turning. Your playing is too sad to ignore. He smiled faintly, continuing the melody. It's raining outside. Rain makes me think of the night Minseo died. She loved the rain, used to dance in it when she was little, no matter how much our mother scolded her. Tessa moved closer, sitting beside him on the bench like she had so many nights before. But tonight felt different, heavier, more real. Tell me about her, she said softly. The real her, not the headlines. Dae-hyun's hands stilled on the keys. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he began to speak, his voice rough with memory. She was brilliant, top of her class, scholarship to medical school. She used to patch me up when I'd come home bloody from fights, lecturing me the entire time about how violence never solved anything. He laughed, but it was hollow. She was right, of course, but by the time I understood that, I was already too deep in this life to get out. She didn't judge you? Never. She'd say, You do what you have to, Appa. Just promise me you'll stay alive. His voice cracked slightly. I promised her. And then I couldn't keep her alive, so what good was my promise? Tessa reached out, covering his hand with hers. It wasn't your fault. Wasn't it? I chose this life. I built this empire. Every enemy I made, every line I crossed, it all led to that night. He turned to look at her, and his eyes were wet with unshed tears. I held her in the rain, Tessa. She was bleeding out, and all she said was, Don't let this make you colder. As if she was worried about me, even then. I'm so sorry, Tessa whispered, her own tears falling now. I'm so sorry. Dae-hyun pulled her close, and she let him, wrapping her arms around him as he finally let himself break. They sat there on the piano bench while he grieved, really grieved, for the sister he'd lost and the innocence that died with her. When the tears finally stopped, he didn't let her go. Thank you, he murmured against her hair, for not running, for staying. Where would I go? Tessa said, and meant it. He pulled back just enough to look at her, his hand coming up to cup her face. Tessa, I need to tell you something. Her heart stopped. He knows. Somehow he's figured it out. I know you're hiding something, he continued, confirming her worst fear. I've known since the beginning. The way you watch people, the way you assess every room you enter, the careful way you answer certain questions. You're either a cop or a spy, and honestly, I don't care which. Tessa's blood turned to ice. Dae-hyun, I don't care, he repeated firmly. Because whoever sent you here to investigate me or infiltrate my organization or whatever your mission was, they didn't account for one thing. You're a good person, Tessa. I can see it in everything you do, and I think, somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing me as a target and started seeing me as a person. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. You knew? From the second night. You talk in your sleep sometimes. Said something about a case file. He smiled sadly. I've had people search for bugs, check your phone, follow your movements. You're careful, but not careful enough to fool someone who spent 20 years staying alive in a world where trust gets you killed. Then why? Tessa's voice broke. Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you throw me out or what? Hurt you? Kill you? Dae-hyun shook his head. Because the moment I saw you, really saw you that night at the bar, I knew you were different. And when you said I do at that chapel, even drunk and laughing, there was something in your eyes that made me want to believe in second chances. Tessa was crying again, but for different reasons now. I was supposed to gather evidence, build a case. They think you're trafficking weapons, hurting people. They sent me to prove it. And did you find evidence? She met his eyes, unflinching. No, because I don't think you're the man they think you are. I think you're trying to survive in a system that doesn't forgive weakness. And somewhere along the way, you became the thing people feared instead of the thing they loved. Maybe that's all I am now. No. Tessa took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. You're the man who pays for neighborhood kids' school supplies, who visits his sister's grave every Sunday, who plays sad piano at 3 a.m. because you're too afraid to let yourself feel during the day. You're the man who's kept me safe, given me freedom, and never once made me feel like a prisoner, even though you knew I was lying to you. Tessa, I'm not going back, she said, the decision crystallizing as she spoke. I'm not reporting to them anymore. I'm done lying to you and done pretending this isn't real. They'll come for you. Your department won't let you just walk away from an active investigation. Let them try. She leaned in close enough that their breath mingled. I choose you, Dae-hyun. I choose this. Whatever this is, I'm choosing it. He kissed her then, soft and desperate and full of everything they'd been holding back. Tessa melted into him, 3 weeks of tension and denial finally breaking as his hands tangled in her hair and hers clutched at his shoulders. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dae-hyun rested his forehead against hers. If you do this, there's no going back. You understand that? You'll be marked, compromised. They'll consider you a traitor. I know. You could lose everything. I've already lost everything that mattered when I started lying to you. She kissed him again, softer this time. Besides, I think I found something better. They spent the rest of the night tangled together on the couch, talking until dawn painted the sky pink. Tessa told him everything, the real investigation, her captain's suspicions, the files they'd built on him over the years. Dae-hyun listened without judgment, occasionally asking questions, always holding her hand. For what it's worth, he said as morning light streamed through the windows. They're wrong about the weapons. I deal in information, protection, real estate, boring stuff, relatively speaking. The weapons trade is too messy, too many variables. I learned that lesson when Minseo died. I believe you. You shouldn't. You barely know me. Tessa smiled, exhausted and strangely at peace. I know enough. The next few days passed in a strange bubble of happiness. Tessa stopped checking in with her contact, ignored the increasingly urgent messages on her burner phone. She and Dae-hyun moved through the penthouse like they'd always belonged together. No more separate rooms, no more careful distance. But reality has a way of crashing back in. It happened on a Tuesday. Tessa was at the market, her bodyguards trailing at a respectful distance, when she saw him, Captain Huang, her supervising officer, standing across the street in civilian clothes, his expression grim. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We need to talk, now. Or we come in officially. Tessa's hands shook as she typed back. I'm out. Find another detective. The response was immediate. You don't get to quit in the middle of an operation. Meet me in 1 hour at the usual place, or I'm issuing a warrant for Kang Dae-hyun's arrest based on what we have. Your choice, Detective Park. The world tilted. They were calling her bluff, forcing her hand. Either she came in and faced the consequences of her betrayal, or they'd go after Dae-hyun with everything they had. And suddenly Tessa realized that loving someone meant being willing to sacrifice everything to keep them safe. She looked at her bodyguards, young men just doing their jobs, protecting her because Dae-hyun had asked them to. She thought about him at home, probably working in his study, occasionally checking his phone to see if she'd sent a message. She thought about Minseo, bleeding in the rain, worried about her brother even as she died. Then Tessa made her choice. She met Captain Huang at a cafe far from Dae-hyun's territory, her bodyguards confused but compliant when she told them to wait outside. The captain sat in the back corner, 2 cups of coffee already ordered, his face carved from stone. Detective Park, he said as she slid into the booth. Or should I say, Mrs. Kang? But what Captain Huang said next would force Tessa to choose between the man she loves and everything she thought she knew. Will her heart survive the truth? Part 2 reveals all. If you've stayed with us this far, you're amazing. Subscribe now and comment below. Would you risk everything for love?